At dinner, my sister announced her baby's father was my husband. Until I spoke up. You think you know the people closest to you. You believe that no matter what flaws they have, there are certain lines they would never cross. I used to believe that too. My name is Marina. I'm 29, and until a Thursday evening in March, I thought I had the perfect balance of career, marriage, and family. That day, I received the call I had worked 4 years for promotion to commercial director at the tech firm in Austin, where I'd spent countless nights hunched over glowing screens. I laughed out loud in my office when my manager gave me the news. It meant a 40% salary increase, international projects, the recognition I had been chasing. I called the 2 people I wanted to share it with, most my husband David and my younger sister Beatrice. Dinner tonight, my treat. Let's celebrate at Terzo, I said, choosing that sleek Italian place where a single entree costs more than I used to make in a week. But I could afford it now, and I wanted this night to shine. I arrived first in a navy dress David always loved. The restaurant buzzed with laughter and the clink of wine glasses. I chose a quiet corner table. For once, I wanted to celebrate without interruption. When I saw them walking in together, something tugged inside me. Beatrice looked radiant, almost glowing, and David seemed unusually tense. He hated expensive restaurants, but this was more than nerves. There was a current between them I couldn't place. Congratulations, Mari. Beatrice hugged me with a warmth she rarely showed. She was never one for affectionate gestures, least of all with me. David kissed my cheek quickly, avoiding my eyes. We ordered a $200 bottle of Chianti. I told them about the projects I'd lead the doors opening for me. David fidgeted with his napkin. Beatrice leaned forward as if every detail mattered. Then Beatrice cut me off. Actually, we have news too. She reached for David's hand across the table. My stomach clenched. I'm pregnant. Time collapsed. The chatter of the restaurant dissolved into static. I stared at her hand intertwined with my husband's. Pregnant. David cleared his throat. It happened, Marie. We fell in love. The air froze. I thought I might scream, but nothing came out. I just stared at the 2 people I trusted most. How long? My voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. 3 months. Beatrice said softly, stroking her still flat stomach. Right after your birthday. December. It was March now. 3 months of lies. 3 months of them playing happy family while I buried myself in 12-hour workdays dreaming of this promotion I wanted to celebrate with them. David finally looked at me. Relief flickered in his eyes as if confessing freed him. We didn't want it to happen this way, but what do you want me to say? I interrupted, my tone flat. Congratulations, Beatrice whispered, almost smiling. Love is love, right? And the baby needs us both. I felt a buzzing in my ears, like standing too close to an electrical wire. I placed 2 50s on the table, stood, and smoothed my dress. I'm going home. Do whatever you want. As I walked toward the door, I glimpsed their reflection in the wall mirror, my husband and my sister still seated, still holding hands. Beatrice was smiling. When I got home, everything looked exactly as I had left it that morning. The bed was made, the kitchen counters gleamed, even the Dallas Cowboys mug David insisted on keeping sat on the counter, ridiculous and ordinary. How could life appear so intact when mine had just shattered? I dropped my purse by the door and sat down on the beige leather sofa, still in my heels, staring at the wall. I expected screaming, breaking glass, maybe a flood of tears. But what came instead was numbness, like the world had switched to mute. My mind was a snowstorm of static. The toothbrush David used every morning stood beside mine in the bathroom. His shirts filled half the closet. It felt obscene, as if a stranger's belongings had been planted in my home. The thought that he had touched Beatrice with the same hands he used to touch me made my skin crawl. Hours blurred. I paced the apartment like a ghost trapped in its own haunting. I replayed every small moment of the past few months. His late nights at work, Beatrice's sudden trips to Austin, her casual questions about my schedule so innocent at the time, now sinister. The pieces clicked together into a pattern I had refused to see. At 2 a.m, my phone buzzed. A message lit up the screen. I'm at B's house. We'll talk tomorrow. DB. He called her that now, a nickname he had never once used before, as if they had been speaking this private language behind my back for months. The message was short, casual, almost administrative, as though our 4 years of marriage could be wrapped up with an initial. I stared at it until the letters blurred. Anger should have come. Instead, the numbness deepened. I wandered back to the living room window, looking down at the Austin skyline. Cars still moved along the streets. People still lived their lives. And I, the woman who had thought she was building a future, was suddenly reduced to nothing more than a placeholder in someone else's story. When dawn finally broke, I was still in that navy dress, my hair stiff with hairspray mascara, smudged into shadows beneath my eyes. My phone showed 17 missed calls from my mother. Of course, Beatrice had already told her probably a version where she and David were star-crossed lovers who simply couldn't resist fate. I called my office and said I wouldn't be coming in. My assistant Simone gasped softly at the sound of my voice, but didn't press. Take care of yourself, Marina. Call if you need me, she said gently. In the shower, the tears finally came. Not cinematic sobs, but the exhausted weeping of someone who has lost more than one person in a single night. My husband, my sister. The 2 people I trusted most had chosen each other and left me with the shards. By mid-morning, 3 new messages blinked on my phone. Mari, we need to talk. It wasn't how we wanted you to find out. Please call me. We can resolve this like adults. All from Beatrice. I deleted them without opening. I couldn't bear to read her excuses, her justifications, her attempts to paint betrayal as love. For the first time in years, I spent an entire day doing nothing. I ordered Chinese food, let it grow cold on the counter, watched mindless television that didn't register. My phone rang every 2 hours. I ignored it. That evening, the apartment door clicked open. David still had his keys. He walked in as if he owned the place, suitcase in hand. His eyes darted toward me, then away like a guilty child. "It wasn't planned, Mari," he said while pulling shirts from our shared closet. His voice sounded rehearsed like he had practiced lines in the car. "It just happened. As if betrayal's a storm you can't control," I murmured, watching him fold the very clothes I had bought him. "We didn't mean to hurt you," he continued, stuffing socks into the suitcase. "Bea was going through a tough time. She needed someone. One thing led to another." "How long?" I asked, my voice steady despite the trembling in my hands. He hesitated. "Officially, since January. 4 months. 4 months of kissing me goodnight, of eating dinners I cooked, of pretending." My stomach twisted. "I'm finding a lawyer," I said simply. He paused mid-fold, finally looking at me. "Mari, it doesn't have to be like that. We can resolve everything. Civilly. Divide things fairly." The word fairly burned. Betrayal dressed up as compromise. He zipped the suitcase and carried it to the door. "We'll talk more soon," he said, not meeting my eyes. And then he was gone, leaving behind a hollow echo in the apartment. For hours afterward, I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the closet half empty. My body felt drained, but my mind had finally begun to stir. If David thought he could betray me and still claim rights to what I had built, he was wrong. Somewhere deep beneath the grief, the first spark of defiance flickered. The weekend dragged by like a fever. David had left with one suitcase, promising to return for the rest. I half expected him to show up again, barging into my apartment, as though nothing had changed. Instead, I got silence. No calls, no apologies, just silence. I needed direction, something to anchor me. So I called Helena, my best friend from college, the only person I trusted completely. She had built a solid career as a family law attorney in Houston. I could barely get the words out. My voice cracked as I told her everything: the dinner, the pregnancy, the betrayal. She listened in silence. When I finished, she exhaled sharply. "Marina, I'm so sorry, but listen to me carefully. Don't give in to despair. Gather every document, marriage certificate, deeds, bank statements. Bring them all. We'll prepare the strongest case possible." "Helena, I don't care about the money," I whispered. "Stop. Don't say that. You worked hard for everything you have. You can't let them take it. If you roll over now, they'll strip you bare." Her words jolted me. She was right. Beatrice's sudden radiance, David's reckless confidence, they had expected to cash in. They thought I'd crumble. That night, I pulled out the metal safe hidden in my closet. Dust coated the dial. I hadn't opened it in years. My fingers shook as I spun the combination, my birthday reversed. Inside, beneath the deed to my apartment and my passport, lay a thick envelope stamped with the county clerk's seal. I froze. I had forgotten. The prenuptial agreement. Memories rushed back like a film in reverse. A warm April afternoon 2 weeks before the wedding. My lawyer at the time, Patricia Williams, had insisted it was wise. "You're young, successful, buying property. Protect yourself, Marina. It's not about distrust. It's about foresight." I remember David laughing, beer in hand. "Prenup. Isn't that rich people nonsense? We love each other. Love doesn't need papers." I had pushed back gently, reminding him it was just to give me peace of mind. Eventually, he shrugged and signed. He hadn't even read the clauses, treating the 15 dense pages like a formality. And now here it was. I sat cross-legged on the bed lamp, casting a circle of light, and began to read every word. Complete separation of property. Each spouse shall maintain sole ownership of all property acquired before and during the marriage. My heart pounded. During the marriage, too, that meant every dollar I earned. Every investment, even my apartment, all mine. David had no claim. I flipped to the next section, trembling. Waiver of spousal support. Neither party shall be entitled to alimony, maintenance, or financial support from the other in the event of dissolution. A laugh escaped me, half relief, half disbelief. David, who had just suggested alimony over dinner, had signed away that right 4 years ago. Page after page reinforced the armor inheritance. Untouchable debts, separate businesses excluded. Every clause was airtight. Dr. Williams had been meticulous. I leaned back against the headboard, clutching the papers. For days I had felt powerless, stripped of dignity. But here in black and white was proof that their plan, their smug assumption that I'd hand over half of everything, was doomed from the start. Images flashed through my mind. Beatrice's calculating questions about my salary, her probing about the apartment's value. David's casual resentment when I bought things he couldn't afford. They had been circling me like vultures waiting for the right moment. And yet 4 years earlier, David had already signed away his leverage without even realizing it. At 2 a.m, I scanned every page with my phone and emailed them to Helena. Subject line, "From God." 15 minutes later, she replied, "Marina, this changes everything. Call me tomorrow." I set the papers back into the safe, but before closing it, I allowed myself a smile, small, sharp, and full of a new kind of strength. For the first time since that cursed dinner at Terraso, hope stirred in me. Maybe I wasn't as cornered as they thought. Maybe I held the real power. The next morning, I woke with the prenup still echoing in my head. The sun streamed through the blinds, bright and almost mocking. For 3 nights, I had felt powerless. Now, clutching that contract, I felt something new: clarity. But clarity came with memory. I couldn't stop replaying the day David signed it. It had been a Thursday in late spring, warm enough that the air carried the smell of cut grass. We had driven together to Dr. Williams' office in downtown Austin. David had been late hungover from a night out with his dealership buddies. His shirt was wrinkled, his hair uncombed, and he muttered complaints about missing a potential sale. "Sorry, babe," he said, leaning in for a kiss that smelled faintly of beer. "This won't take long, right?" I remember the way Dr. Williams looked at him, calm, professional, but with a flicker of disapproval. She explained each clause slowly, carefully, as though speaking to someone who wasn't listening. Complete separation of assets. No joint property unless explicitly shared. Each of you is responsible for your own debts. Inheritance is protected. Spousal support is waived. David nodded absently, signing each page as if it were a rental agreement for a car. I tried to catch his eye. "Do you understand what this means?" I asked. Yeah. We keep what's ours. Makes sense?" he said, scrawling his name with impatient strokes. I wanted him to take it seriously, but I was so in love, so convinced that marriage was forever, that I let it slide. His carelessness seemed almost charming back then, proof of how little he cared about money compared to love. On the drive back, he teased me. "You and your lawyer stuff, always planning 3 steps ahead. I still think it's weird. But hey, if it makes you sleep better, who am I to argue?" I had laughed, touched his hand, and thought, this is what love is. Trusting someone enough to protect yourself, but believing you'll never need to cash in that protection. Now sitting in my bedroom years later, I could see how blind I had been. That same contract David dismissed as rich people nonsense was the fortress now standing between me and ruin. I pictured Beatrice's face when she learned. The disbelief, the fury. She had probably imagined David as her ticket to stability, to everything she thought I had unfairly won. She had underestimated me, just like David had. A thought began to form, sharp and deliberate. They had chosen to humiliate me publicly, dropping their betrayal on the table like a champagne toast. If they wanted theater, I could give them a performance they would never forget. I practiced the lines in my head, the way I would keep my voice calm, measured, the way I would slide the prenup across the table, watching realization dawn in their eyes. For once, I wouldn't be the woman blindsided. I would be the one in control. The image gave me strength. For days, I had felt like a victim of someone else's story. But maybe this was my story all along. I tucked the prenup back into the safe, then opened my laptop. Numbers filled the screen, my accounts, my investments, the startup shares I had bought 2 years ago. Over $600,000 in assets. Mine, untouchable. The more I stared at those figures, the more the panic in my chest eased. I wasn't the desperate one here. David was. Beatrice was. Without me, they had nothing but debts and an unplanned baby. And that was when I realized they hadn't just betrayed me out of passion. They had done it out of calculation. Love was their excuse, money was their motive. I closed the laptop and sat back, breathing slowly. A plan was forming. I didn't need revenge that screamed or shattered dishes. I wanted something quieter, sharper. Something that would leave them stunned in silence exactly as they had left me. That night, lying alone in the king-size bed we had once shared, I whispered to myself, "You signed your own sentence, David. And Beatrice, you bet on the wrong horse." For the first time since everything collapsed, I slept soundly. Not because I had forgiven, but because I finally knew the ending of their story and the beginning of mine. 3 weeks passed like a blur of silence, paperwork, and David's awkward trips back to collect the rest of his belongings. He always came with Beatrice like she was his bodyguard. I stayed cold, polite, saying as little as possible. Their eyes flicked around my apartment like vultures surveying prey. They thought it would soon be theirs. Every evening, my mother called, her voice heavy with that soft insistence only mothers have. "Marina, he made mistakes, but David is a good man. And your sister, she's carrying his child. Don't let anger blind you. Think of the baby, always the baby. As though an unborn child could erase betrayal, as though blood ties erased cruelty." I bit my tongue each time, letting her believe what she wanted. She didn't know about the prenup. No one did. By the 4th week, I was done waiting. If they wanted a confrontation, I would choose the stage. I dialed Beatrice's number. She picked up almost instantly, as if she had been waiting. "Mari, I'm so glad you called. I knew you'd come around." Her tone was sugary, rehearsed. "Hi, Bea." I forced a calmness into my voice, the kind you use when talking to a skittish animal. "I've been thinking. Maybe you're right. Maybe there's no point in dragging this out. We're adults. We can resolve this without hatred." The silence on the other end was thick, her surprise audible. "Really, you're okay with it?" "I'm trying to accept it. You fell in love. It happens. And now there's a baby to think about. Why destroy each other when we can settle this like civilized people?" I could almost hear her smile widening. "David will be so relieved. He was afraid you'd make it complicated. No need. Why don't we meet face to face? Talk about how to split things fairly. No lawyers yet. Just us." "That would be perfect," she said quickly, too quickly. "Where, Terzo?" I replied, letting the word hang in the air like a challenge. "Saturday night, 8 o'clock. Full circle, don't you think?" Her laugh was nervous. Yes. Poetic. Closure. We ended the call with false warmth. "See you soon," I said, hanging up before she could add more. Afterward, I sat in the quiet of my apartment, the city lights flickering beyond the window. My heart pounded, not from fear, but from anticipation. They had humiliated me in that restaurant, using my celebration as their stage. Now, I would use the same place as mine. The next few days, I prepared as if for battle. I chose the outfit, a black dress that spoke of power rather than softness, heels sharp enough to echo against the restaurant floor. I practiced my face in the mirror, rehearsing calm indifference, the faintest smile of someone holding cards no one else could see. Helena thought I was insane. Marina, you already won. The prenup makes everything airtight. Why put yourself through another scene? Because they humiliated me in public, I said steady. They planned it. They rehearsed it. They wanted to see me crumble. I want them to feel the same weight of realization, the same sting of silence. And I want it in the very place they chose to break me. Helena sighed. You're playing with fire. But, God, I wish I could be there to see their faces. Saturday arrived. As I walked toward Terzo, the night air was cool, the city humming with weekend energy. I entered the same dining room, the same scent of garlic and wine drifting through the air. The maitre d' recognized me, his polite smile tinged with memory. A better night this time? I hope, he said softly. I gave a small smile. Better, yes. I requested the same corner table. My hands rested calmly on the linen as I waited, my pulse steady. This wasn't dread. This was theater. At precisely 8, David and Beatrice walked in. They were glowing, holding hands like a couple playing house. Beatrice's belly had just begun to show, her dress chosen to emphasize it. David pulled out her chair with a flourish he had never once offered me. Marina, thank you for doing this, he said, relief flooding his face. It means more than you know. Beatrice's eyes sparkled. We knew you'd understand. Family is family. I smiled faintly, pouring myself a glass of water. Yes, family. The waiter brought the Chianti, the same bottle as last time. The irony wasn't lost on me. They thought this was the beginning of their victory lap. They had no idea they were about to watch the curtain fall. We clinked glasses, though the taste of wine turned bitter on my tongue. Across from me, Beatrice beamed, one manicured hand resting on her stomach as if to remind me of what she now held. David leaned back, looking oddly comfortable, like a man who had already rehearsed his victory speech. So he began after the waiter retreated about the divorce. We were thinking, it's best to keep this amicable. No need for lawyers if we can settle things fairly. The word fairly scraped against my nerves. Still, I tilted my head, pretending curiosity. Fairly, I repeated. And what does that mean to you? Beatrice glanced at David, then spoke with rehearsed ease. The apartment for starters. We could sell it and split the money down the middle. Same with your investments. And of course, with your new promotion, alimony would help. While we adjust with the baby, just until we're stable. I almost laughed, but kept my face still. Alimony. They thought I would bankroll their new family fund, their betrayal. I let the silence stretch, savoring their confidence. Then, with deliberate calm, I reached into my purse. David's eyes flickered with anticipation, as if I might pull out signed papers granting them exactly what they wanted. Instead, I laid a thick envelope on the table. The courthouse seal caught the candlelight. What's that? David asked, his voice uncertain now. Our prenuptial agreement, I said evenly. Do you remember David 4 years ago? You called it rich people nonsense. The color drained from his face. Beatrice's brows knit. What agreement? I slid the papers out, slowly spreading them across the white linen. Complete separation of assets. Everything I owned before the marriage and everything I acquired during remains mine. No division, no sharing, nothing. Beatrice grabbed the papers, flipping through them frantically, as though a loophole might appear if she turned pages fast enough. That can't be legal. Married property is always shared. Not when both parties sign a contract stating otherwise. I cut in. Page 3, Section 1. David signed in front of witnesses, notarized. Ironclad. David's hand shook as he skimmed the clauses. But the apartment? I lived there. I contributed. You paid for groceries, David. $300 a month. I covered the mortgage, condo fees, insurance, utilities. You don't buy a piece of a $400,000 apartment with bags of spinach and gas money. Beatrice's voice cracked. Then alimony. He has a right to alimony. I tapped a paragraph with manicured nails. Page 5. Spousal support waived. Neither party entitled to alimony or maintenance. David signed that too. His face flushed deep red. I didn't know what I was signing. You tricked me. The accusation was loud enough to turn heads at nearby tables. I kept my voice calm, almost gentle. You were there, David. Dr. Williams explained every clause. You nodded. You said you understood. And you signed your name 15 times. Beatrice's eyes widened as the reality hit. So, you mean he gets nothing? Exactly. My smile was small, deliberate. No apartment, no investments, no alimony, just the debts and the salary he already has. And of course, his obligation to support his child. The silence that followed was thick, broken only by the clatter of silverware from another table. David rubbed his face with both hands, muttering curses under his breath. Beatrice tried one last card, her voice trembling. But Mari, we're family. You can't just leave us with nothing. And the baby, your niece or nephew, don't you want to help? I leaned forward, my voice low, but sharp enough to cut. Family doesn't steal husbands. Family doesn't orchestrate humiliations in expensive restaurants. Family doesn't gamble with someone else's life, hoping to cash out. If you wanted my help, you should have thought of that before. David looked at me with raw desperation. Marina, please, don't do this. I made a mistake. Don't ruin me. I stood, sliding the papers back into the envelope with care. You ruined yourself when you signed this contract, David. I just had the foresight to keep it. I left 2 crisp 50s on the table again, covering more than my share, and stood tall, the black dress flowing like armor around me. Beatrice's eyes shone with tears, her lips trembling. David slumped in his chair, defeated. Around us, diners carried on with their evening, oblivious to the quiet implosion at our table. As I walked out of Terzo, the maitre d' gave me a polite nod. Better night, ma'am? I allowed myself the smallest smile. Much better. Outside, the night air was cool against my skin. For the first time since everything collapsed, I felt not just relief, but power. They had tried to break me with theater, and I had written a final act they never saw coming. The morning after Terzo, I woke earlier than usual. For once, the air felt clean, my apartment free of shadows. The prenup lay safely back in the closet safe, but its presence seemed to radiate through the walls. My fortress, my shield. Helena called before I'd even finished my coffee. Well, she asked eagerly. Better than Broadway? I said, my voice steady for the first time in weeks. You should have seen their faces. She laughed, then grew serious. Marina, listen. We'll file immediately. With that contract, David has no leg to stand on. It'll be over in 60 days if uncontested. And if he contests, on what grounds? He signed, witnessed, notarized. There's no way out. The confidence in her voice sealed it. For the first time since the betrayal, I knew the outcome wasn't just possible, it was inevitable. Meanwhile, David and Beatrice's reality began to crumble quickly. Through family whispers, I learned he was panicking. He had told Beatrice about the child support obligations, 20% of his income every month until the baby turned 18. Nearly $800 siphoned off automatically. Beatrice had gone pale. Her freelance gigs barely scraped $2,000 a month, sometimes less. Rent, food, baby supplies, they had underestimated everything. They thought they would inherit comfort. Instead, they inherited survival. My mother's calls turned plaintive. Marina, they're struggling. David drives to San Antonio every day from Austin. Beatrice is exhausted. Can't you be kinder? I close my eyes, listening to her plead for compassion. Mom, they chose this. They didn't just hurt me, they calculated to ruin me. And they failed. That's not my burden to carry. There was a long silence. Then she whispered, you sound so cold. I sound strong, I corrected. At work, I channeled everything into my new role. My team noticed. You're different, Simone said one afternoon, handing me a stack of reports. Sharper, focused. She wasn't wrong. Heartbreak had hollowed me, but survival had sharpened me into something else. I stopped second-guessing my worth. Every meeting, every negotiation, I spoke with a clarity that startled even me. At night, I allowed myself small luxuries, candles lit in every room, long baths in silence, solo dinners at the very restaurants I once reserved for special occasions. Being alone no longer felt like punishment. It felt like freedom, but the contrast was always there. I heard through my father, more blunt than my mother, that David was drowning. Commissions at the dealership had dipped. Luxury cars weren't selling in that economy. With child support sliced off his check, he barely covered gas for the commute. He looks tired in Marina, my father admitted one Sunday. Thin. Beatrice, too. The baby isn't even here yet, and already they're cracking. I listened, expression neutral. A year earlier, those words would have broken me. Now they only confirmed what I already knew. Betrayal fueled by greed never ends in triumph. One night, I stood at my balcony, Austin's skyline glittering beneath me. I thought about the night at Terzo, the smugness in Beatrice's smile, David's relief as he clasped her hand, the satisfaction they felt in revealing their truth. And then their faces when the prenup landed on the table. Horror, realization, collapse. That was the turning point. Not just legally, but emotionally. They had expected me to crumble. Instead, I walked out stronger than I had ever been. And quietly beneath the satisfaction, I felt something else: gratitude. Gratitude to my younger self for insisting on that contract. Gratitude even for the betrayal for forcing me to draw boundaries, to realize that family is not always sacred, that love is not always loyal, and that self-preservation is not selfish. David and Beatrice thought the story ended with me broken. But as I gazed out over the city, I knew my story was only beginning. 6 months later, the divorce decree arrived in a plain white envelope. Just paper, really, but when I slid it open and read the official words, dissolution of marriage, I felt a strange stillness wash over me. 4 years gone with the stroke of a judge's pen. Helena called immediately. It's done. You're free? Free. The word didn't sting. It lifted. I placed the decree on my kitchen counter, then poured myself a glass of champagne. Alone, yes, but not lonely. I toasted the skyline outside my loft window and whispered, two surviving. Meanwhile, the fallout for David and Beatrice unfolded exactly as I'd imagined. Word trickled back through family. They were living in a cramped trailer park outside San Antonio. Rent barely $500 a month, but even that strained them. David's commissions had collapsed. He now brought home less than $4,000 before child support. After the automatic deduction, his paycheck looked closer to $3,000. For a man used to weekend beers, football games, and shiny cars on the lot, the math was brutal. Beatrice weighed down with the newborn, barely worked. The freelance jobs dried up, replaced by long nights of crying and endless diapers. She sent my mother messages dripping with resentment. Marina should help. She has so much. Doesn't she care about her niece? My mother repeated them to me, pleading again. But by then, I built a wall around my heart. Mom, I said firmly, they built their life on betrayal. I won't subsidize it. Still, I couldn't help but notice the irony. The sister who once mocked me for being too ambitious now lived dependent on my parents' retirement checks. The husband who once enjoyed my generosity now sweated through double shifts only to hand part of it over every month to support a child he conceived through betrayal. And me, I had never been more alive. At work, I exceeded every target. My team flourished under my leadership. Bonuses stacked up my salary, leaping to heights I'd once only dreamed of. Colleagues whispered that I was unstoppable. They weren't wrong. I moved into a 2-story loft overlooking Ladybird Lake, walls of glass and steel. I hosted colleagues for wine nights, friends for long Sunday brunches. My home was no longer a battleground of betrayal, but a sanctuary of independence. Therapy sessions with Dr. Chen guided me deeper. You've redefined family, she told me gently. Blood doesn't guarantee loyalty. Now, what kind of connections do you want to choose? I thought about that often. Instead of clinging to toxic ties, I surrounded myself with people who valued me for me. Simone became not just my assistant, but a trusted confidant. Helena, once just my lawyer, became a sister in truth. And yet sometimes late at night, I wondered about the baby. Sophia, my niece. I'd seen her photo once passed around on my mother's phone. A tuft of dark hair, a stubborn chin. Innocent. She hadn't chosen this chaos, but every time guilt flickered, I reminded myself stepping back wasn't cruelty. It was survival. Beatrice and David had made their choices. My responsibility ended where their betrayal began. One evening, I received a message from an unknown number. The words were shaky like the hand of the man who wrote them. Marina, you were right. About everything. I destroyed the best thing I had. I'm sorry. I hope you're happy. David. I stared at it for a long moment. Once those words might have reopened old wounds. But now, they were just letters on a screen. Proof that he understood, but far too late. I deleted the message without reply. That night, standing on my terrace, I realized the truth. Revenge hadn't rebuilt me. Justice had. Boundaries had. And perhaps most of all, the quiet dignity of knowing that while others tried to strip me of everything, I had protected myself. David and Beatrice's life had shrunk into survival. Mine had expanded into possibility. Sometimes, the sharpest justice isn't delivered in court or shouted in anger. It's lived day after day in the stark contrast between what could have been and what is. By the time the leaves began to turn in Austin, I no longer thought of myself as the woman betrayed. That title belonged to someone else, someone I'd shed like an old skin. In its place stood a version of me I'd never fully known. Stronger, sharper, freer. Work became less of a battlefield and more of a stage. I closed deals with confidence, spoke in boardrooms without hesitation. My salary crested past $200,000 annually. Colleagues whispered my name with admiration and sometimes envy, but this time I recognized the difference. Healthy envy can inspire. Toxic envy destroys. I had already survived the latter. Outside of work, my world expanded in ways I hadn't expected. Therapy taught me that healing isn't just about survival, it's about rediscovery. What brings you joy? When no one is watching, Dr. Chen asked one session. The question haunted me. I tested Answers pottery classes on Saturday mornings, hiking trails around Barton Creek, solo trips to New Orleans where I let jazz swallow me whole. Each step felt like reclaiming pieces of myself I'd long neglected. And then one evening, at an art exhibition downtown, I met Daniel. He wasn't dazzling in the way David once was. No rehearsed charm, no salesman's grin. He was quieter. An architect with calm eyes and calloused hands. Someone who spoke about space and light the way poets speak about love. We spent an hour standing before a sculpture neither of us understood, laughing at our own confusion. At the end of the night, he asked softly, "Would you like to see my designs sometime?" I said yes. Daniel had his own thriving firm, his own loft, his own ambitions. He didn't need me to rescue him, nor did he try to ride my success. For the first time, I felt what partnership could actually mean. Not dependence, not competition, but balance. You've got an impressive strength, he told me once, tracing a finger across my wrist, but also a piece. It's rare. I smiled. I had to fight for both. Meanwhile, the noise from David and Beatrice's world grew faint. Through my parents, I learned they argued constantly about money. David's commissions continued to shrink. Beatrice's freelance career was a ghost of what it had been. They had moved deeper into the trailer park, further from the life they once tried to steal. Sophia turned 1. My mother sent me a photo, despite my request not to. The baby had Beatrice's eyes, David's nose. She looked innocent, unaware of the battlefield she'd been born into. I allowed myself a moment of softness. She didn't ask for this, I whispered to no one. But then I closed the photo, letting the image dissolve into my phone's background glow. Compassion for a child did not mean reconciling with those who betrayed me. Friends sometimes asked, "Don't you feel empty, cutting off your sister like that?" I'd shake my head. I feel lighter. Family is not a chain. It's supposed to be a choice. And if blood turns poisonous, you walk away. In the quiet of my loft, with the city stretching wide beneath me, I realized something else. The best revenge was never the prenup, never the courtroom win, never even the horrified looks on their faces at Terzo. The best revenge was living beautifully. Traveling to Paris in first class, wandering the streets of Rome, laughing in Barcelona cafes. Designing my own office filled with glass walls and clean lines. Coming home to Daniel, who kissed me like he wasn't taking anything from me, but sharing everything with me. One night, sitting on my terrace with a glass of wine, I thought about the chain of events that had led me here. Betrayal, humiliation, rage, and then rebirth. Ask yourself, what would you do if your sister stole your husband? Would you collapse or would you rise? I rose. And in rising, I discovered the truth. Sometimes the people you think will destroy you are the ones who accidentally set you free. 3 years have passed since that night at Terzo, the night when my world cracked open and rebuilt itself in a single blow. Sometimes, when I walk by that restaurant on my way to meetings, I glance at the glowing windows and wonder if another woman sits at that same corner table smiling too brightly, unaware her life is about to unravel. Life has a cruel way of teaching us the lessons we resist most. Mine came wrapped in betrayal, sharpened by envy, sealed by blood ties I thought unbreakable. But here's what I learned. Family is not defined by DNA. It is defined by loyalty, by respect, by love that does not measure itself against envy or greed. My sister may always share my blood, but she does not share my values. She does not share my heart. Love is not blind trust. Love without boundaries becomes exploitation. David taught me that. He wasn't evil, he was weak. And weakness, when paired with someone else's greed, becomes dangerous. We think betrayal will break us. But sometimes, betrayal is the only thing strong enough to shatter the illusions we cling to. I used to think success meant more work, more money, more recognition. Now I know success is something quieter. The ability to choose peace, to say no without guilt, to sleep at night knowing no one holds a leash on your spirit. David and Beatrice still live in the trailer park, or so I'm told. They argue, they scrape by, they dream of money they will never touch. Their lives are built on the quicksand of choices made in selfishness. Me, I have built something else. A fortress of self-respect. A career carved from my own hands. A partnership with Daniel rooted in equality, not dependency. Nights filled with peace, not suspicion. Days filled with purpose, not resentment. And Sophia, the child who had no choice in any of this. I think of her sometimes. Not with bitterness, not with longing, but with hope. Maybe she will grow up and break the cycle her parents built. Maybe she will choose differently. People often ask me, don't you want revenge? I smile. I already have it. Revenge is waking up every morning in a home you earned. Drinking coffee you bought, living a life no one can take from you. Revenge is watching those who plotted your downfall drown in the quicksand they dug themselves. Revenge is not anger. It is freedom. Ask yourself, what would you do if your own sister tried to steal everything you had built? Would you forgive? Would you fight? Would you walk away? There's no right answer. Only this: protect yourself. Protect what you build. Protect your dignity as fiercely as you protect your breath. Because once lost, it is harder to reclaim than any fortune. I used to believe loyalty was unconditional. Now I believe loyalty must be earned. And if betrayal taught me anything, it is this: the sharpest justice is not in courtroom victories or public humiliation. It is in the life you build afterward. So this is my story, not of ruin, but of resurrection. Not of revenge, but of justice. And as you listen, I ask you, what would you have done? If this story hooked you, drop a comment with what you'd do. Subscribe for more full story dramas and tap like to help the channel grow. Your take might show up in the next video.